What is up, everybody? What is going on? Sixers get the W, 103-101. We are breaking it down. Joel Embiid, MVP Joel Embiid, with one of the best performances of his career. Joining me, my man Tiago at Tiago PHL. What's up, Tiago?
What's up, Chris? Yeah, best is an understatement, man. He literally saved the team tonight. If it wasn't for Joel Embiid, they would have lost by probably 20 points against a heavily undermanned Boston Celtics team. So for you guys looking to make projections into what the second round could potentially look like, tonight was a small preview of that. And while Joel dominated the game and showed why, in my opinion, he's a runaway MVP, there are definitely question marks around what the hell are the Sixers going to face in the second round, man, because it didn't look pretty for most of the game, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, we got to talk about Joel Embiid. Let's break it down. 52 points, 13 boards, 6 assists, 20 of 25 from the field. Let's go back a little bit. He had 24 and 10 in the first half, 9 of 13 from the floor, was completely locked in, doing all the dirty work, engaged on both ends, was just ridiculous. Embiid and Harden had 39 of the Sixers' first 53 points in the first half. That carried over into the second half where he continued his dominance. You look at that third quarter stretch, man, he had 14 points, 6 of 6 from the field, multiple rejections at the rim in the first 8 minutes of the third quarter. It kind of got a little dicey there, especially at that beginning of the fourth quarter when he was off the court. But right as soon as he re-entered the fourth quarter, man, the MVP chants were coming down. This was the MVP performance for Joel Embiid. I thought the way Embiid has matured this season was on full display against the Celtics tonight. You know, in previous seasons, there were times late in this fourth quarter where he would have held on to the ball and fumbled it, turnover, something of that kind. What did we see tonight, Tiago? We saw him find PJ freaking Tucker in the corner, not once, not twice, but 3 freaking times, Tiago. PJ Tucker, we're going to talk about him in a little bit, but Joel Embiid, man, what a mature MVP-esque game. What's your thoughts on MVP Embiid?
Yeah, he's the best clutch performer out of the MVP trio that people are mentioning by a mile. By a mile. And if you're talking about what the MVP vote should look like, I think you have to consider what late game performances look like. And when you talk about, you touched on it, Chris, like playmaking, scoring, defense, he is head and shoulders above Jokic and Giannis in that department in clutch time. I mean, head and shoulders. It's not even close. Not even close. So, yeah, you got a glimpse of why Joel Embiid, in my opinion, is the MVP. It was a vintage performance where he carried the team. I thought that he was absolutely sensational in every aspect of the game. I mean, when you look at offensively, you look at the 50 points, and that only tells even part of the story because without Robert Williams, they're trying to throw like a very aggressive help defense towards him, using that team approach to try to defend it for most of the time. And he made so many fantastic reads. You talked about the PJ Tucker reads at the end of the game. But they were there throughout the entire game. And I thought that for what we've seen from Joel against Boston, it is such a far cry of that Embiid from previous years where he looked kind of clueless against the Celtics. He was absolutely dominant. And I don't think Boston, even with Robert Williams, has much in their arsenal to defend Joel. I mean, you can say, yeah, Robert Williams makes a difference. He does, but one-to-one matchup, he will absolutely destroy Horford, Grant Williams, Robert Williams, Baby Williams, whoever you want to call. He will absolutely annihilate them. So, yeah, I thought it was a vintage Joel Embiid game.
Yep. We're going to go to some comments real quick. We're going to talk about this next, Rudy Poo. Maxi gave the dumbest performance I've ever seen in crunch time. He is scared of Derek White. We're getting some comments about that. Joe Sullivan is in the house. What's going on, Joe? Says, glad we got the win, but epic choke job. It was dicey, man. That shot by Tatum there in the corner, I'm not going to lie, I thought that was going in. Almost a choke job. Mr. Rudy Poo says Maxi really a no-show against Derek White. Step up. Medium Giant is in the house saying Maxi and Toby each scored 5 points. Let's jump on this, Tiago, because this is a big one. Like when you look at Joel Embiid and how much attention he gets, yet the rest of the team just fails to capitalize on it. We've seen Maxi and especially Tobias Harris really struggle offensively. I thought Tobias Harris had some good minutes on Tatum. But what's your thoughts on those two, especially struggling? Because in the middle, that Embiid, that Harden two-man game was electric. The Boston Celtics had no answer. But we know the Sixers are going to need much more effort, much more contribution other than Embiid to beat the Celtics in a second round.
Yeah, speaking specifically about Maxi, I mean, this is not the first time he has struggled against Boston. If you look at his performance throughout the entire year against the Celtics, it's been pretty poor. And I think a big part of that is the fact that Boston has a lot of sticky defenders on the perimeter. So you talk about Derek White, who people mentioned on the chat. You're talking about Malcolm Brogdon. You're talking about Marcus Smart. They can always have a body on Maxi that makes it hard for him to get his shot. And they make it really hard for him to get to the rim. They play that heavy drop defense. They really clog the paint. They make it hard for you to get in that restricted area. So I think if you're talking about Maxi, how, and this touches a bit on the coaching, how Doc Rivers can help him is having him play more off the ball. He's a phenomenal shooter. He's a fantastic spot-up shooter for multiple parts of the court, in particular the corner. And you have guys who can handle the ball like Harden, like Embiid, like perhaps even a Shake Milton, who can get him open looks off the catch, because I think that's going to be his path against Boston. I think if you're going to ask Maxi for 7 games to carry a secondary scoring load for the Sixers, I don't think he's built for that against Boston. I mean, I could be wrong, but the data suggests otherwise. So I think it falls a little bit on the coaching to create those open looks for him and understand that, he's not a finished product. He's not, sometimes what people expect him to be as a scorer, but he's a phenomenal shooter, and they should utilize them more off the ball. So we'll see, but I'm not too concerned about Maxi overall, because we all know like confidence is always a thing with Maxi. He's always going to have it. So I'm looking forward to see what the challenge holds for him.
When it comes to Boston, I think it's the bench. I mean, tonight the Boston Celtics outscored the Sixers bench 18-10. The Sixers had 10 points off the bench. When you look at the Celtics bench with White, Brogdon, Williams, Muscala, Pritchard, they've got a lot to throw at the Sixers. I feel like the Sixers can match up with their starters incredibly well, but it's the bench and the coaching where I get really worried in a short series with the Celtics. I guess, Tiago, maybe the silver lining is that in the playoffs, in an elimination game, in a crucial game, you're going to see Embiid play a significant amount of minutes. But my concern on the opposite end, man, it's not going to end well, because Tatum and Brown will have fresh legs at the end of the game. That's my take. What's your take?
And keep in mind, Chris, this was a truncated Boston bench because they were missing Jaylen Brown and Robert Williams. So they were using guys off the bench like Blake Griffin and perhaps even Luke Cornett, who are probably not even going to look at the court in the playoffs. So even with those guys, they still outscored the Sixers bench. I think the Sixers second unit overall was pretty poor tonight. I think it's a mix of a lot of things. So I think first and foremost, when you open the fourth quarter with Georges Niang, you're already asking for trouble. I mean, Niang has been absolutely dreadful since the All-Star game. And perhaps we should ask him more about his Ben Simmons opinions, because he had a lot of them over the last couple of months and hasn't really played much since. But Daniel House has really come on strong over the last month or so, both as a shooter and as a defensive player. And the Sixers played a similar wing-heavy team in Toronto a couple of days ago, where they displayed a House, McDaniels, Paul Reed, Shake defensive group that was heavily switchy and made it hell on Toronto to score. I mean, they were switching everything. And if you're watching that game, it really passed the eye test. So when you go away from that and you play a team like Boston, who has multiple ball handlers on the court, and you put Niang out there to start the fourth, you're already asking for trouble, man. I thought that was one of the misses of tonight's game was sticking with Niang because he doesn't really give you much defensively. And I think for the playoffs, speaking bench wise, I mean, they have this core that I talked about with, a House and McDaniels and even Shake for a little bit. Shake shot the ball very well. So I think you just gotta lean on that group, man. Like it doesn't have to be that complicated. You can use Niang in situations where you need offense, but to give this guy 20 minutes every night and check off that box, it's just insane. It's just insane. So I think if they make the right calls defensively on the bench, they'll be fine. But yeah, I mean, we all know Doc Rivers is not about that. So,
Yeah. Well, what is your non-Embiid minutes in the playoffs or non-Embiid lineup in the playoffs? Like I'm looking at absolutely Harden, House, McDaniels, and Reed. Those four, without a doubt. Who would be your fifth there? Would it
yeah,
be
I mean,
Shake?
I don't even think you need to go Shake. I mean, I think Shake has earned some minutes, maybe 5 minutes here and there. Fact of the matter is, like, you're gonna have Harden play 38 minutes a night in the playoffs. It's what it's gonna be, and I think Maxi's gonna eat some of those Shake minutes. So I think overall, if you're asking me who are the core guys who I lean on off the bench every single night in the playoffs, right? I think you have to consider McDaniels, even though I think he's been highly underwhelming, but he gives you that rebounding energy. He gives you athleticism, length, something you don't have. I think obviously Paul Reed has earned at least 5 minutes a night, backing up Embiid. And I think the next guy in line for me is House. I think House has proven that he can play next to Harden. Like he understands Harden extremely well. I mean, he understands where to move, where to stand, to pass the ball, not to stick on the ball. So I think that synergy works well. I think those are your three guys. I think there are going to be some matchups where Niang just is unplayable, but for some reason, and this drives me crazy, Doc thinks that Niang can switch on anybody defensively. If you watch the Sixers, he's switching on Tatum, he's switching on Mark Smart, and it's like, no, man, like you can't do that. Like you just can't do that. So teams are going to exploit that in the playoffs, and I'm hoping that Doc sees that very early on.
We have to talk about one more guy before we get into our player of the game, and that is PJ Tucker. All right, Tiago. PJ Tucker, last 3 games, is shooting 7 of 12 from 3-point range. 7 of 12. In 2 of those games, he has 3 3-point shots made. Before then, 0. 0 game this season. He's hit 3 or more 3-pointers in a game. Could you imagine like PJ Tucker balling out the remainder of this season, actually becoming a viable, not high volume 3-point shooter, but just what are your thoughts on PJ Tucker and what it means?
Chris, if you're going to tell me that the Sixers road to the championship is the PJ Tucker corner 3, I am going to spend the rest of the playoffs on the beach watching the waves go by because I just don't see it. The guy was phenomenal late tonight. Hit 3
huge
clutch threes. I am not going to criticize that. He was absolutely dreadful for 3.5 quarters. I mean, absolutely dreadful. Defensively, offensively, rebounding. He was dreadful. So, yes, you take the 3-corner threes and, you kind of tip your cap up to PJ. If you're telling me this is sustainable offense for the playoffs, I'm going to spend my time doing something else, man, because it's not going to go down the Sixers' way. But give credit to Embiid for trusting PJ. PJ has a pedigree of hitting corner threes, but again, I can give you at least 5 or 6 occasions tonight where he just passed up a wide open corner 3 and just, ate up the offense and made it impossible to score in the possession. So,
yep. Mr. Rudy Poo says Doc thinks George Niang is the white Grant Williams.
Yeah.
PJ Tucker is an enigma. Absolutely.
I just think he's a bad basketball player, but some people call it an enigma. Right. I call it a bad basketball player.
Let's roll into player of the game. Oh, I wonder where this could go. I'll throw it to you first, man. Who is your player of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna make it very simple. I think Joel is hands down. I don't think well anybody can look at this game and think anything else other than Joel Embiid. I mean, there's no world where you're like, I
No.
think Harden played okay. I mean, Embiid was literally the only reason why they were ever in the game, let alone winning the game. So, I mean, the guy is the MVP. I mean, we can perhaps have a conversation about the absurd MVP voting process where this guy is continuously overlooked. And I just think games like tonight makes it embarrassing for people to fill out their ballots even before the season is over and, pencil in Giannis as a vote. I think it's utterly embarrassing. It's embarrassing because you watch this guy tonight and there's no way you can tell me this guy's an MVP. So,
Yeah. Let's go. It's got to be Embiid. Usually during these shows, I try and pick. You're only allowed to pick one player, but tonight belongs to Joel MVP Embiid. 52 points plus 17. I want to know what that plus minus was in the second half because he was outstanding in the third quarter. The
Chris,
Boston
Celtics. Can you pull up? I think you can pull up the fourth quarter plus minus, right? Can you do that?
I'm not
I
sure.
think it breaks it down by quarter. Scroll up or no? Scroll away.
Not,
oh, not yet. So maybe tomorrow they'll
not
have
yet. Probably tomorrow they'll have it where
so
you can
tomorrow,
see.
Yeah, tomorrow post the fourth quarter plus minus, post the fourth quarter or the clutch time stats. They're overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really want to see what those look like because when he came back, the Sixers went on a 15-3 run. And I mean, if he's not the MVP, I don't know anything. I'm just gonna throw this out there, Tiago. Jokic had 14 points in 25 minutes and 8 turnovers and a minus 21 in a blowout loss to the Houston Rockets tonight. I'm just gonna throw that out there just because.
You know what the funny thing is going to be is this: Denver's going to face LA Lakers in the first round after the play-in, and the Lakers are going to beat that team by 5 games, and you're going to have a 3-time MVP player who can't even get out of the first round, and people are going to be asking why that is, and they're not going to trace it back to this guy's defense and their overall team defense around him. I think it's embarrassing that people don't want to have the conversation and just want to look at the guy's a phenomenal offensive player. There's no debate around that. But basketball is played on both ends of the court, and I think people are just completely lost sight of that over the course of the last couple of years.
Mr. Rudy Poo says the MVP odds have shifted heavy to Embiid after those performances. They have to, man. They have to. Just watch the game. All right. That about wraps it up, Tiago. Final thoughts on the game. Where can we find you, man?
Yeah, I mean, final thoughts on the game is a little bit concerning that they beat the Jaylen Brownless Celtics in pretty much the buzzer. But I think, if you're going to get 50 points from Embiid against the Celtics, you can probably rest assured that we're playing in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Bucks. I don't think it's going to be the case, but I think overall, if you look at big picture, they're positioned to perhaps beat Boston in the 7-game series. I think when you look at the big picture, Boston just doesn't have the playmakers that the Sixers does, and particularly Tatum, who is highly overrated. We all know that. But his ability to create shot for others and find open guys is not even at the same level of a James Harden. And the Celtics don't have a dominant scorer like Embiid. So I think the Sixers go into that series as a favorite, but it's the entire thing. And the coaching, the players, the execution, all to fall into place. But I'll be honest, I would be highly disappointed if the Sixers don't beat Boston in the second round. Highly disappointed.
You know what I think about, like, after watching a game like this? My first thought goes to last playoffs when the Sixers became so heavily, so much heavy ISO basketball. We didn't get a lot of glimpses of the Harden and Embiid pick and roll before the playoffs. We saw it all game long against Boston, and it was unstoppable. Boston has zero answers for that pick and roll in the middle of the floor there. So there is that. As long as Harden and Embiid are healthy and on the court a lot, I think they do have a legit chance. It just comes down to, Doc, and it comes down to the bench. And I think those are two big things. That's been the Sixers' Achilles heel for years.
And I would stress this one last point. Doc should not be let off the hook if they don't beat Boston. They're healthy. They're
Absolutely.
ready. There is no world where they lose to Boston and we're talking about running this back. There is no world. I mean, this team is built for at least the NBA Finals, if not a championship. If they fall anywhere near close, anywhere short of that, there has to be a serious reshuffling of the deck. And there's already a narrative around the Sixers regular season and how, maybe or maybe no, they're built to go to the NBA Finals. And if they don't get there, the coach needs to be gone and certain players need to be gone. That's just the way it's got to be. So,
all right. That is Tiago. Follow him on Twitter at TiagoPHL. I am Daz. We'll be pumping more of these out as we get ready for the playoffs. If you guys are watching us, please smash that like button. Help us out. Get this video out to more audiences and more viewers. Again, thanks for watching. For Tiago, for myself, stay awesome, everyone.